Hey, what's going on, everybody? On this week's Movie Spotlight, we are going to be looking at one of the greatest action franchises of all time, in that being Indiana Jones. We're going to look at the legacy and the history of everyone's favorite archaeologist, globetrotting professor. So let's get right to it. Indiana Jones is a movie franchise created by George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. The franchise is based on the adventures of Dr. Henry Indiana Jones, who is a professor and archaeologist. The character has spawned numerous films, television shows, comic books, novels, video games, and a theme park attraction at Disneyland. Primarily known as a film franchise first, the series starred Harrison Ford in his most iconic role to date, as Indy is known for his pistol, his whip, and his brown-laced fedora. Of course, the Indiana Jones franchise started back in 1973 when George Lucas was writing a modern adventure serial of a character named Indiana Smith. Originally intending to star famed actor Clint Eastwood, Eastwood's contract for another film, The Outlaw Josey Wales, prevented him from starring as Indiana Smith. Over the course of many years, Lucas worked tirelessly not only on Star Wars but also this untitled Indiana Smith storyline. He worked with director and screenwriter Philip Kaufman, who helped him come up with the Ark of the Covenant plot device. During that time period, Lucas met and became best friends with director Steven Spielberg, who wanted to direct the picture. Spielberg disagreed with the character that Lucas created, as Spielberg saw Indy as a James Bond type character and didn't like the name of the character as it sounded a little too plain. They both loved the last name Jones, which was Spielberg's idea, and to balance the name out, they settled for the first character's name of Indiana. The name Indiana was the name of Lucas's Alaskan Malamute dog, who he named Indiana. Indiana, the dog, was also the inspiration for Chewbacca for the Star Wars franchise. Indiana Jones, while at the time seemed like any ordinary name, but has become extremely famous as the character is considered to be one of the greatest action-adventure heroes in cinema. Even though Spielberg liked the concept of the story idea, he was reluctant to sign on to direct the first Indiana Jones movie. George Lucas wanted Spielberg to direct 2 sequels afterwards, and Spielberg's hesitations were growing bigger and bigger. Lucas tricked Spielberg into thinking that both of the sequel stories were already written, so he agreed to sign on, only learning later on that that wasn't the case. Spielberg said that angered him at the time, but once he started directing the films, he grew so attached to the character and the stories, and he said that the Indiana Jones franchise is one of his favorite and proudest accomplishments in his life. Working with Lucas also cemented their friendship as the two became lifelong business partners and film pals. George Lucas, Lawrence Kasdan, and Steven Spielberg worked on the first screenplay for the first Indy adventure, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and were inspired by not only the adventure serials of the 1930s and 40s, but also Carl Banks's Uncle Scrooge comics. In one such comic, Uncle Scrooge is being chased by a gigantic boulder from the comic The Seven Cities of Cibola, which was an inspiration for the famous opening of Raiders of the Lost Ark, in which Indy runs away from a giant boulder. The idol and opening traps for the sequence were also inspired by the Uncle Scrooge comics. When designing the look for Indiana Jones, Spielberg thought of Humphrey Bogart's character from Treasure of the Sierra Madre, while costume designer Deborah Nadelman took inspiration from Charlton Heston's character from the film The Secret of the Incas. Initially, the film was rejected by every major studio in Hollywood. Paramount Pictures agreed to finance the film if Lucas signed a 5-picture deal, to which he agreed. Raiders of the Lost Ark is Steven Spielberg's most storyboarded film to date, and when creating the special effects for the film, they decided to use miniatures, models, and puppets to make the film feel like a cheap and dirty serial from that time period. When casting Indiana Jones, Tom Selleck was the favorite of Lucas and was a sure casting choice. Harrison Ford table read against actress Karen Allen as a favor to Lucas, and when Spielberg saw the audition tape, he thought Ford was a better choice and thought it would be better to cast Ford, who was still slightly unknown at that time period. He thought casting an unknown actor would make the character feel like an everyman, as Selleck was a very famous actor during the 1980s. Ford was chosen to play Indy, in which it defined the rest of his career. Raiders of the Lost Ark became famous for not only its 1930s Nazi-era serials, but some of the most famous sequences were either ad-libbed by Ford or were accidentally created for the picture. This scene was ad-libbed by Ford, which became a famous line for the character.
10 years ago.
It's not the years, it's the mileage.
And this scene where Indy shoots the flamboyant swordsman was improvised by actor Harrison Ford. Ford, like many of the crew, were suffering from severe food poisoning at the time, and originally in the script, Indy was supposed to use his whip to take away the swordsman's sword. Not feeling well, Ford said, "Why don't I just shoot the sucker?" So he did, and the scene became one of the most famous scenes in the entire film. Indiana Jones is depicted as a Gary Sue type character. He is a badass who isn't afraid of anything. So Spielberg thought Indy should have some sort of fear or weakness, so Lucas came up with the idea of Indy being afraid of snakes.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
Indy's deathly fear of snakes gives the character a human touch and makes him that more dynamic to his personality and character. Indiana Jones never loses his hat in Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is an homage to the classic serials of the 1940s, as it was considered poor taste for a gentleman to lose his hat in certain dire situations. However, Spielberg and Lucas made a running joke of it, as Indy loses his hat at least once in both of the related sequels. The sequence with the melting, exploding heads originally gave the film an R rating, so they added layers of fire in front of the heads, which helped secure a PG rating for the movie, as PG-13 hadn't yet been created for the rating system. John Williams scored the famous Indy March, which was a part of the Empire Strikes Back march that wasn't used for Star Wars. John Williams added new layers to the demo, making Indiana Jones's theme one of the most famous themes in cinema. Raiders of the Lost Ark debuted in the summer of 1981 to audience and critical acclaim and remains in the top 25 highest-grossing blockbusters when adjusted to inflation. Raiders of the Lost Ark put Harrison Ford on the map as a megastar, and audiences clamored for more Indy adventures. Spielberg directed the sequel to Raiders, which was actually a prequel film, in 1984, which was titled Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Temple of Doom found our heroes stranded in India, searching for the legendary Shankara stones with the help of a love interest named Willie Scott and Indy's sidekick, Short Round. Spielberg did not enjoy making this film as much as he liked making Raiders, but he said that the experience of directing this feature was the most important, as he later married Kate Capshaw, whom he's been married to ever since they met on this film. Temple of Doom was Spielberg's first sequel, and the movie was a critical and financial success, but it received a lot of criticism for its depiction of Indian culture and its extreme violence. Temple of Doom was one of the first films that contributed to the creation of the PG-13 rating system in America. And actress Kate Capshaw said that she was legitimately tortured in this film for eating monkey brains, thrown into a cave of bugs, and constantly had to scream her heart out at every moment she could, something that Spielberg told her later that he loved orchestrating. Then in 1989, Spielberg and Lucas finished the final film of the trilogy entitled Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. The Last Crusade starred River Phoenix as a young Indiana Jones, in which we see how he becomes afraid of snakes, where he gets that facial chin scar, the bullwhip, and the hat, while then flashing forward to Indy in the present, somewhere in 1938. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade dives into the search for the Holy Grail and features for the first time Henry Jones Sr. and his kidnap, which leads both father and son on an epic quest for the search of the divine.
Yes, sir.
It is you, Junior. Don't call me that, please.
Spielberg cast famous Bond actor Sean Connery to play Indy's father, as they are accompanied by both Sala and Marcus, two characters from the original film. The Last Crusade is considered by many fans to be the best of the series, as the story and the back-and-forth banter between Indy and his father created some memorable laughs, as well as pulse-pounding adventure and heart. Spielberg has said that The Last Crusade was his favorite film of the franchise, and that famous shot of Indy and his father riding off into the sunset was meant to emulate a close of the franchise, and also was inspired by the John Ford Western films of the 1950s. George Lucas wrote and produced a Young Indiana Jones television series, which starred Sean Patrick Flanery, and the show was a huge success but was canceled after 3 seasons for its huge budget. It wasn't until 2 decades later when Lucas and Ford thought about resurrecting the Indiana Jones franchise for another feature. Spielberg, who was against the idea, decided to make the movie, and is in a way very sorry that he did. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was a box office success, and it received strongly positive reviews from the critics. However, the fans of the franchise deemed the film as awful and unwatchable. The heavy use of visual effects, the poorly written screenplay, and the bizarre alien twist literally alienated the fans, no pun intended, and many called for a boycott of the film, much like the Star Wars prequels. The fan backlash has never been so harsh next to Lucas's Star Wars prequel films, and the amount of negativity around the film caused George Lucas to sell Lucasfilm to Disney, as well as retire from the filmmaking world. The absurdly cheesy dialogue, the MacGuffin, and Shia LaBeouf caused criticism among the fan community, who deemed this movie as one of the worst action films of the 21st century. There is a scene where Indy escapes a nuclear blast by locking himself in a lead-lined refrigerator, in which fans created the term "nuking the fridge," which means that the film is a stinker, similar to jumping the shark. Nuke the Fridge made Time's top 5 buzzwords of 2008, and Spielberg and Lucas were glad they brought this term into pop culture. After the success of Star Wars The Force Awakens, it was announced that a 5th, untitled Indiana Jones adventure would be released sometime in 2019, with Ford and Spielberg returning without Lucas. Fans have been mixed about the news, but some are supportive, saying that Indy in the hands of Disney will be something special and something to look forward to. The success of Indiana Jones has not only impacted pop culture, but it has changed the movie industry. Dozens and dozens of films have tried to emulate the success of Indiana Jones, and numerous spin-offs and adventure stories were made to bring in the same audience crowd with little to no success. Indiana Jones is frequently parodied in animation, television shows, and comic books, and many video games have tried to emulate the action-adventure feel that the Indiana Jones franchise created. The Indiana Jones film tropes are seen in many action films today, and fans still clamor for the first 3 Indiana Jones films. Disney opened a popular Indiana Jones-themed ride at Disneyland in 1995, making it one of the most popular attractions at Disneyland. The American Film Institute placed the first film, Raiders of the Lost Ark, as being one of the top 100 films of all time and one of the greatest action films ever created. Indiana Jones is a character so unique and special that people all over the world can identify with. Much like Darth Vader's breathing and helmet being widely recognized, Indy's fedora is also one of the most recognizable things in cinema. Films have tried to emulate the success of Indy, and some have succeeded, but Indiana Jones is the essential action hero in cinema and has gone down as being one of the most iconic characters ever seen in the movies. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the legacy and the history of Indiana Jones. It's one of my all-time favorite movie franchises when I was a kid. I still love it now. If you like this video, click the thumbs up button over here. Also subscribe to this channel and check out our website, filmschoolhooligans.com. We will see you guys next week.
chose poorly.